Remember the day as if it was yesterday. As soon as the phone rang, I ran to the living room, and it was the Canadian Embassy. After weeks and months of interviews and background checks and applications, I'd gotten the visa. I got to go study in Canada. With that call, I joined the millions of Arabs who have left their homeland to become part of the Arab diaspora. My story begins in Lebanon. I was born in Beirut to a Lebanese mom and a Syrian dad, neither of whom had ever left the Middle East. And growing up, I would have never even imagined all the places I would get to see. But in the decades since I left Lebanon, I have had the privilege of traveling and living and working in 50 different countries. And in crossing those 49 borders, I managed to get to a place where I can be all the things that I am: Lebanese, Syrian, Muslim, Arab, naturalized Canadian, gay, all those things without a hint of contradiction. On January 13th of this year, when the Muslim ban came into effect, I felt that my identity as an Arab, as a Muslim, was under attack. I could not stop thinking of the thousands of Arabs back home who also dreamt of crossing their own border, but had that dream snatched away. This order was different because it wasn't about security. Added background checks, added vetting, that makes sense. A safe and secure America makes sense. We all want that. But this was a blanket ban. To me, the ban said one message loud and clear: Arabs are not wanted here. In the days and weeks after the ban came into effect, what gave me the most hope was actually an initiative we started right here at HKS. And I'm happy to see some of the participants sitting here. The idea was very simple. We have a lot of Arabic speakers at Harvard, and we would connect them with newly resettled refugees from the Arab world. We called it the Middle East Refugee Service Initiative. At our first event, we had, which was 2 days after the ban came into effect, we had 16 newly resettled refugees from Iraq and Syria, and 30 Harvard students. The response from Harvard students was so overwhelming that we had to turn students down. And still, we ended up with a ratio of almost 2 to 1. The second event was no different. We had 10 Lowell high school students come down, also all from resettled families from Iraq and Syria. And the student response was incredible. Now, when we first thought of this, we thought it was a very simple idea. We have tons of Arabs and Arab Americans at Harvard, all very privileged to be here, and this is a very simple way to give back. What we didn't expect is that more than half of the students who signed up were not Arabs or Arab Americans. They were simply Harvard students who had took an interest in the area, who had learned the language, and wanted to give back. When I think back about those two Mercy events, I think of students like Rosie Greenberg, one of our MPP classmates. Rosie grew up in Philly, not speaking a word of Arabic, but she took an interest. She crossed the border out of the US into Jordan, learned the language, immersed herself in the culture, and today can speak Arabic better than I do. Rosie is one of millions of people from the West who have crossed borders and in that process enriched themselves. What I learned from the two Mercy events is that my visceral reaction to the ban was not just because it was a Muslim or Arab ban. The reaction was because it was an attack on the ability to cross borders. It was part of the wave of countries closing down their borders. That is coming right at the time when the world's problems are global. There is no such thing as a local problem. Climate change does not just affect one part of the world. The debt crisis in Greece did not stop at Greece's borders. And you can't put up blockades in the Mediterranean to stop refugees fleeing war. We here at the Kennedy School are being taught to tackle global problems, but that's not going to mean anything if we can't cross borders. So what do we do? The first thing we need to do is change the narrative of what immigration means. Immigrants are not those from the global south who are lucky enough to make it to the west. Immigrants are not people you need to take pity on. No. They're equal global citizens. And they're not just from the global south. Rosie is a global citizen. I am a global citizen. What unites us all is crossing borders and enriches us. I'll end by sharing this. The day that I got that call from the Canadian Embassy, first person I told was my mom. I ran to the kitchen and I remember her standing there and I told her for the first time that I'd applied and that I'd gotten the visa. And she turned to me and said, "Ziad, you know what I want you to do, but I never want you to look back on this day and tell me because of you I failed." Now, back then, at 17, I thought that meant I get to go to Canada. Looking at it now, I understand how hard it must have been for her to hear her youngest son telling her that he's leaving after her 3 other children had also left the country. I say this to tell you that being a global citizen is not always an easy task. Sometimes you make sacrifices. Sometimes you have the choice to make that sacrifice. The thousands that are fleeing war don't have that choice. They cross borders because they must. But make no mistake, global citizens are a gift to any country that will have them. Global citizens are the way we're going to solve the world's problems. So join me by changing the narrative. Stop using the words illegals and legals and citizens, and think of global citizens. Thank you.